Okay, buddy. Sorry, mate. We've got work to do. Oh, we've got work to do. Off you go. Good boy. Oh, look at it. Alright. So I've had loads of people ask me about this piece of work, this Egyptian triptych. So hang around with me now and I'll take you through it step by step and show you how I made it. So I thought it would be really interesting to show you some of the pieces from my own personal embroidery collection. So this is the first video in a series of that. Some of the pieces I've stitched myself and some of them I've collected, made by other people. So I hope you enjoy that. I've got lots of goodies to show you, so do hang around for the next ones as well. So this piece was a second year apprentice piece that I did at the Royal School of Needlework, and the idea behind this was that we took the techniques we'd learnt in the first year and we developed them, and we learnt more advanced techniques and we practiced them. So this isn't a beginner's level piece, this is a bit more advanced, and it's how to put those pieces together and make a whole design. So the next level on really. So let's take a look at that. So here's the piece in full. So the idea was this is a 3-part piece, and we did one section every term. So the 3 terms in the year, so it was 1 part every term. And we had to do a figure, a symbol and an animal. So figure, symbol and animal. And then it was how we put all these pieces together to make a whole piece now. So rather than just doing one individual element and stitching that, it was putting things together. So I chose Egypt. I love everything Egyptian, and I've based this piece on a painting from an Egyptian tomb painting, and it's from the tomb of Tutankhamun. So this is Tutankhamun's wife, and I'll try and say it properly, Ankhesenamun. That's it. This is the Eye of Horus, and then this is the falcon, the symbol of Egypt. And I've made this background to fit all of these pieces together. So this is the tomb painting format inside a border. So we had to do a particular size. This piece, by the way, took 228 hours. I added it up, how long it took. So it had to be a particular size in order to get it done in that time. So that was how the size was defined. And I wanted it to look like a tomb painting, and sort of like a papyrus painting as well, so a little bit of a mix of those two things. So I've actually painted the background to look a little bit like papyrus. This is a white linen originally, and I've actually hand painted this with watercolours, so I'll show you that here. I found this in my notes that I did for the project. These are the watercolour paints, and I've actually got an actual piece of papyrus here that I could copy, and you can see how it's sort of quite grainy. It's quite sort of strands of the actual papyrus leaf, so I wanted it to look like that. So I did a little bit of practice on a bit of paper, and I seem to remember how I did this. I spread the bristles out to get that effect of the papyrus leaves, and I practiced on the paper, and then I did a little bit on the fabric as well beforehand to see how that would work. It's always different on fabric than it is on paper, and you can see I've actually tried to paint the hieroglyphs as well, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later because there's a bit of a story behind that. So practice first, because this is quite a big piece to cover. So hand painted all of it in the watercolour to create my background. Now the design has all been worked out beforehand. So this took a year in all to do this piece of embroidery in the 3 separate terms. So we had to have a clear idea about what was going to come where. So this is my rough plan. This is not to scale, as you can see, but this is where every element is going to go. And then as I did each element, I drew it out properly. and scaled it up properly. So this is just a sort of me working out where everything's going to be. Quite a funny little falcon here. Quite a cute little face. But it didn't need to see the actual falcon, it was just where the falcon was going to sit. So this was my design that I worked from to get everything in the right place. So we started with the symbol in the middle, and then we worked the two outer pieces. So just to quickly explain what they are. So this is gold work in the centre here. So this was to try some different gold work techniques. We were allowed to bring some colour into it now as well, which we weren't allowed to in the first piece. So colour in it now. Lots of padding in this one as well. Some silk shading in the middle. So quite a few different techniques going on in this one. Then the figure had to be in silk shading. So this is tapestry silk shading. I'll talk more about that when we talk about the figure. So tapestry silk shading with this embellished with a little bit of gold work as well. And then on the other side we've got the falcon, who is natural silk shading. So he sort of flows with the shape of the bird, and he's just silk shading, pure silk shading, nothing else going on in him. And then for the background, I've put in some extra techniques. We've got some appliqué at the top and the bottom here for the sun and the sun rays, just to tie the whole thing together so that they didn't just look like they were plonked in the middle of the embroidery. So that ties it all together. So what I want to do is we'll show you each piece a little bit more closely, so each different embroidery a little bit more closely. So let's zoom in and have a look at those. Okay, so let's have a look at Queen Ancas of the Moon first. So here she is. I'm going to point with a little wooden pointy stick because this is quite delicate, this gold work, and as much as it's nice to touch your embroidery, it is a good idea to protect it as well. So I'm not going to touch it, I'm going to use this to point with. So this is Queen Ancas of the Moon. So this is tapestry silk shading. So tapestry silk shading means the stitches all go straight up and down. So regardless of the shape of the figure, what's happening here, see all these stitches straight up and down vertically, and then you use the colours and the tones to create the 3D effect. So even the face here is straight up and down, and the arms and the fingers as well. And I'll zoom in on that in a minute and we can have a look at that a little bit more closely. So I just want to show you where she came from. So here she is. This is on the throne that came from the tomb of Tutankhamun. This is a very beautiful gold chair, and this is her anointing her husband Tutankhamun with some oil. So I took that figure as my basis for my design, and then I actually drew her out again, and then you can see here that I've actually coloured in this design myself. This gives me an understanding of where the colours and the tones are going, so that when I stitch it I can literally stitch from this and see where the darks and lights are. So I'm not making any of it up when I actually come to stitch. I've got something quite clear to follow. What I also wanted to do for this piece was to make it look old, and I wanted to use old threads where I could, and these threads here are actually old Purcell's Filicel threads. They are pure silk threads, and these are the colours that I've actually used. These were quite difficult to use actually, because some of them were rotten and they fell apart, so I had to test them all and see if they broke first, and I'm using the ones that didn't break. So those are the ones for her dress, and here's the ones for her skin here as well. So quite a few colours in here. So I've worked this all out beforehand, so that I'm not guessing when I come to stitch the actual thing. I knew exactly what colours I was using and where I was going to do my shading. So I just thought you'd like to see my process and see how I got to this. I didn't just magic it out of thin air. There's quite a lot of preparation going on beforehand. So that's where she came from. And then the other thing that I did, which I always recommend doing, is working out the order that you're going to stitch something in. So silk shading's worked from back to front, so you work the elements at the back first and you work up towards the front. So all of this sort of scarf feature and her clothing, which is behind the arm and behind her body, so these get worked first. Things that are on top get worked last, so her arm and her hands are quite late on. And actually the first little bit, you See that there is her toes. So I did a tiny little foot first, not the easiest place to start. So her feet first because they were into her clothing, and then I came from the inside of the dress here and worked all of this before going on to this. So it's quite a good big area to get going in, to get practicing, get your eye in, get the colours sorted in your head, and then went on to the rest of it. So I've numbered the whole thing so that I have my colours that I've already chosen. I've got my drawing so I know where my darks and lights are. Now I know which order I'm working in. So a lot of planning goes in first. So let's zoom in now and have a look at some of the details of her. Okay, that's good. So the silk shading was all done first, and you can see that the layers here, and you can see these up and down stitches a lot more closely now in her face as well, tiny. And if I just put my finger next to that, you can see the scale of that. Her face is about the size of my fingernail, so it's tiny, and she's even got 2 little lips, separate lips there as well. So these stitches all up and down stitches. Now I do want to just tell you about the hair because I'm quite proud of the hair. This is all bullion knots. If you've ever done a bullion knot, you'll know what's involved, and I think I did count how many there were in it once, and I can't remember what that was now, but there was quite a lot. And then if I just bring this back in, where are we? Here we go. This is my practice with how many strands I was going to use. So this is 4 strands here, and this is 3 strands. And by the look of the piece, I actually used 3 strands there, and just created this kind of a wig effect with these bullion knots. So lots and lots of tiny bullion knots. Must have been mad to do all of these. So these go over the top of the silk shading. So the silk shading's behind, so back to front. So we did the silk shading first, and then the bullion knots on the top, and then the gold work went in last. So you can see this gold work's actually over the top of the silk shading. So this is all silk shaded underneath, and I've come in and put this over the top. So this is using there's a very fine pearl in here, extremely small pearl around the edge, and then some cut work in some smooth pearls here to create the patterns, and then some tiny little chips in here, really are tiny. And then I used the same pearl, just move her up a touch, you can see, to do her bracelets and her jewellery, and then a gold thread just to give some highlights to her gown and into her scarf as well. So it's just about building up these layers and using the different techniques and materials to create the image that you want to create now. And I just want to show you her fine Egyptian crown here. So some twist around the edge here, some passing in the middle. This is all couched down, so this has all been stitched down individually and stitched over the top. Some little cut work pieces in here in bright check, tiny pearl edging, and this tiniest bit of silk shading in the middle here of the asp that comes off the top of her crown, and some more silk shading and some cut work in the top here just to create a really nice pattern in there. So just using the techniques together to create the image that you want to create. So that's Queen Ankhesenamun. I should just zoom out on her. You can have a look at her the other way. And I'll just put my hand next to her so you can see she's about the size of my hand, so really quite tiny stitching there. Okay, so let's go and look at the other side, and we'll go have a look at the other silk shading and the falcon. So this is the falcon. So this is in natural silk shading. So you can see that the stitches now, they don't go vertically, they go around the shape of the bird, and I'll zoom in and show you that in a minute. So different kind of silk shading now, so natural silk shading. But I just wanted to show you this. This is again the preparation work that I did before I stitched him, and I was lucky enough to have a friend who actually owned some birds of prey, and I was able to go and take some pictures of his falcon. He had one, and study him quite closely, and this is the drawing that I did of him to work out where my tones were going, where my darks and lights and my colours. And again I used the filler cell silks because I wanted to try and keep it looking old. So this is my selection of colours. Quite a lot of colours in this. I think if I did it now I probably wouldn't use quite so many, so it's interesting to see how that's developed over the years. So quite a lot of colours in there to keep an eye on, you know, when do you use which shade of grey. So but those were the colours that I used in the silk, so I just wanted to show you again that preparation that I had for that. Okay, so let's zoom in and have a look at the stitching a little bit closer. To show you the top of him really, let's see how close we can get, because he is very small. There we go. And just again to give you a bit of scale, there's my fingernail, so tiny, tiny. And he had a stitch order as well, so again the bits that are at the back were done first. So this wing is coming behind this fluffy part of his feathers here. So you have to sort of almost forget that it's a bird and work it quite systematically, really. So this areas here are underneath these feathers here, but you can see the direction that the feathers are going now, so they're not straight up and down like they were in the figure. They're going much more feather shaped. They're coming up around the head as well, away from the eyes and down the neck and down into the feathers. And I'm hoping you can see it on here, but there's a separate sort of break in the stitching here, and I actually did some split stitch underneath here. So split stitched here and then stitched over that, and that just helps raise that edge and separate it a little bit, so some of the feathers look like individual feathers. Done it on here as well, just to add a little bit more texture to this. I didn't do every feather because it would have been there a long time, but just to highlight some of the feathers and to just make them sit on top as well, so the neck ones blend in nicely, and then he come down his chest and he's got some separate areas and some tiny little stitches for the eye. There's a little bit of split stitch right around the eye there, just to make that stand out a little bit, and again for the beak stitch separately afterwards at the end. So quite a different technique. Now you've got to think about the direction that your stitches are going in and all those changes of colour as well, and make him look like a three-dimensional bird. So lots going on in there. Definitely advanced silk shading technique, that is to learn how to create a texture now, so how to create the feathers with the silk shading stitch and not just do nice smooth silk shading. I just want to show you his feet quickly. Move him up. He's sitting on this branch here, and you can see how complicated this area became because he's got part of his body behind the feathers and behind the feet. The feet are over the top of the branch. These feathers are behind the feet. So there's an awful lot going on in here, so this is why you need to plan it quite carefully to see what's going on. And here's the feather continuing behind the branch as well. But this little bit of stitching here, this is an invisible thread just to get these marks on his claws as well. So just about being a bit inventive and thinking, how can I make that look like his claws? The normal thickness of silk would have been too heavy for that, so I just found a much finer thread, the invisible thread, just to give some highlight into his feet there. So that's the natural shaded falcon. So there he is. So let's see how he fits into the whole piece. Okay, so quite a lot of stuff going on in this part of it. So this is the Eye of Horus, and this is the symbol. So we've got some appliqué. You can't see it too well because it's been stitched over, but just underneath this area here is a piece of brown silk, so that went down first, and on top of that we've got some silk shading, got some cut work, we've got some couching, couch gold, a bit more cut work here, some chips, some pearl, so lots of stuff going on here. So this is where it's really important that you plan things carefully. I just want to show you where it came from. So this is a pendant, actually written down here. It's quite useful. Found wrapped under the 12th layer of linen bandages of Tutankhamun's mummy. Under the 12th layer, he had an awful lot of stuff on him. They had a lot of jewellery and a lot of gold, but this one's particularly beautiful. And you can see how these areas are sort of cracked. The stone that this would have been has got this cracked look, and I was really intrigued by that. I wanted to try and replicate that look there. So I've just taken this part here and the asp as well with the crown on it, and I've used that design there. So I worked out exactly what I was going to do where. This one is really complicated, so it was really important to do this and have an idea and a map of where I was going with it. So you can see my appliqué here, silk shading, cut work, even worked out the outline of the edge there as much as I could. Didn't mean I couldn't change it later, but if you have a good idea of what you're going to do, you'll know it's all going to work together. So chip work, some Italian couching, here's a bit more cut work down here. So I planned the whole thing carefully so that I knew what order I had to do everything in. And then I just wanted to show you this one as well. Loads of planning went into this. So this is a much more detailed area of just the eye, so I broke that down even further. And this is the silk shaded eye area, and this is the diagram I used to shade the eye from. So the light area is up here and the dark areas down here, and I've even got some shading just in the corners. So even that little area there I treated as a separate sort of piece of embroidery, and worked out the colour just for that area there. I did the same for this upper bit that I liked, that sort of broken kind of crackle sort of mosaic type thing, and worked out the colours that I was going to use and used that area there to do my stitching with. I've worked out the gold, I've just written the gold in as well, and I've done the stitch order for how to do this and how to put this together. And again I used the filler cell silks. I wanted to keep that old theme running through. Lots of colours, I just wouldn't choose that many colours if I did it now. Don't know what I was thinking. So yeah, I'd reduce the number of colours down now, definitely, but I obviously got them all in there, I think, somehow. And these are the eye colours as well, so everything is worked out really carefully beforehand. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit and we'll have a little bit of a closer look. We go. So you can see this silk shading now. So this is a kind of a tapestry shading in that the stitches are all going one direction, but they're going at an angle now. They don't have to be vertical, but these stitches all go in one direction. So I kept them all going in the same direction so I could get this nice shading throughout the top here. So the appliqué went on first. This is the brown fabric underneath. Then the silk shading, then the eye. Now there is some padding in this eye. Have a look on the other camera, hopefully you can see that a little bit. And lots of padding throughout this whole piece here, just to sort of start to give it some dimension now. So silk shaded the eye, and then the gold work goes on top afterwards. Now I do remember this, using this gold, because I was using old threads. I managed to find some gold as well that was a bit older, which was great until it started shredding. And I'll let you into a little secret, this here was not planned. The gold, when I plunged it through to the back of the fabric, the gold just disintegrated off the thread, and rather than do the whole thing again, I used a little bit of couching here with a dark thread, a little bit of shading to just cover up those ends, so that I could carry on using it, because I really liked the gold colour and the gold effect, and I didn't want to do it all again. So you can often fix things if you need to, and if I hadn't have told you, nobody would have noticed. So, but I'll let you into that little secret, because it's good just to know that you can fix things if you need to fix things. So that's what that is there, and then I used the same technique to put some colour in here. So this is just stitching over the gold to create this pattern in here. I just talked to you about this, that this is cut work. So this is cut metal pearls over some string padding underneath to give it some dimension. And I actually had these colours made for me, and these are Egyptian colours, made especially for me so that I could make this piece. and it's done in blocks as well, so each block is padded and works separately to create this shape over the eye, and then I've used the colours to shade across the eye into the black at the end. So quite a lot of cut work. You can see how it's just turning with the eye as well, so making the nice shapes there to create that effect. Just want to show you this as well here. So this cut work is at an angle, slanted, but you can see I've come down the body here of the asp in straight pieces. This is quite a bit harder because it's hard to make the edges smooth, but I think I did quite a good job personally down there. It gets very narrow at the bottom. I'll just shuffle it up a little bit all the way down it, so it virtually disappears, and then I did a little bit of shading just to fill in the shape here. Just go to the top, see his crown. So he's got a double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt here. These are the two crowns, and this is all couching as well. So this is the technique over the top, where you stitch over the top of the gold and make the pattern with the stitching as well. And it got very tiny and quite complicated in the middle. Sometimes there's no rule to follow. You just have to go with what you've got, go with what shape you've got, and make it work, which I think is what I've done here really. So it's curled in the middle, and then it makes the shape of the crown around the edge, and then I've just stitched over the top to give this red effect. And I'm hoping you can see on this camera how high this is over his head. There's lots of nice padding in here to really make this bit raised up, along with the cut work round here, just to really give him some dimension and some form, and a little bit of appliqué under here, the little bit of white appliqué. So lots going on: appliqué, padding, silk shading, gold work, a bit more appliqué here as well. The blue is applied as well. So that's how I sort of constructed that. So quite a complicated piece to do, that one. Lots going on. So I just want to pull the camera back out now, and I'll just show you how I finished off and made it look like a finished piece. Okay, so now you've had a little look at the individual pieces, you can appreciate a little bit more about how they all go together. So I just wanted to talk lastly about how I sort of did this final part. Quite an important part, even though it's not the main elements, it was important to tie the whole thing together. So this border, I'd like to show you that because I got quite inventive with this. So this is made up of some ribbon. So there's 3 different colours of ribbon. This is just satin ribbon. I cut it up and I applied it on top of each other. And then to make it look old, I decided that was too bright. So to make it look a bit older, I got an organza ribbon and I applied that over the top of my 3 pieces of ribbon to make it look older. And then I've done the gold work over the top of that, so you can see that at the top and the bottom here. So that's the 3 colours with the gold organza with the gold work on top. So quite a lot going on even in just the ribbon work border really. Little bit of padding for the sun here, some organza on the top, some felt underneath, and I don't know if you can see it on here, but I even went as far as shading the rays of the sunshine and working it out. Here's the rays. And here's the colours that I did. So light, medium, dark, very dark. And that's what I've done throughout here. So lots of details in here, which you may not notice at first, but when you look a bit closer, these things come out. So it really gives you something to keep looking at, which is really nice if a piece can do that. The other thing I just want to mention before I go is the hieroglyphs. So right back at the beginning, I showed you the little sample of the fabric with the painting, little painted fabric samples, and I painted the hieroglyphs. So my original idea was just to paint this whole background with the hieroglyphs, but when I did it, I decided that it was too big and clumsy. I wanted them to sink away into the background and not be the main highlight. So I, in my wisdom, decided that I wouldn't paint them, I would stitch them all. You can see them here on this camera. So this is actually, these are all stitched. All of these hieroglyphs are stitched in an invisible thread. I know you can see it, but that's what it's called, an invisible thread. And I've just couched it down and stitched these hieroglyphs. They don't actually say anything that I know of. Somebody might tell me different. So I stitched them all just to get this really delicate background effect of the hieroglyphs. And although it was a lot of extra work, I think it was really worth it just to finish it off. So I hope you've enjoyed this little tour around my Egyptian triptych. If you've liked this, do let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like to see some more as well, I'll be happy to show you some more pieces from the collection. Don't forget to like, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and you'll get notifications of when we put something new up. And I hope you've enjoyed watching.